Forum co-sponsors are AAUW Winona Branch, Home and Community Options, Project FINE, the Women's Resource Center of Winona, Winona Occupational Rehabilitation Services, Winona State University social work students, and WSU American Democracy Project. We are pleased to welcome those of you in our live audience and citizens who may be watching at home. We also want to thank the City of Winona for allowing us to hold this educational forum in the City Council chambers. For those of you watching at home, we have a call-in phone number where you can provide us with questions for our panel. The call-in phone number is 507-450-3859. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization organized at the local, state, and national level to encourage citizens to become educated and participate in government. While we as a league do study and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties, candidates, or tell voters how to answer referendum questions. This evening's educational forum will begin with a factual presentation by Sarah Slaby, Director of Fiscal Affairs, and Dr. Sarah Knudsen, Director of Special Education. Due to district policy, they will not endorse the school board's referendum question to the registered voters within the boundaries of Winona Area Public Schools. Like the League of Women Voters' position to provide education on the issue, registered voters who go to the polls will decide this issue. The League of Women Voters does allow formal organized groups that have publicly announced their support or non-support on referendum issues before the voters. This evening, we know that Vote Yes organized group supporting this referendum ballot question and Save Our Schools with a non-supporting position on our referendum are here. Both are represented and will respond to public questions following the formal presentation. Each will be given 2 minutes for one of their representatives to present their position. Julie Heinrichs and Lindsay O'Shea are here on behalf of Vote Yes. Alan Hillary and Gretchen Miklich are here on behalf of Save Our Schools. After those presenters, we will begin asking questions submitted to the League of Women Voters and co-sponsored question sorters. Questions may be directed to selected administrative staff or others on the panel, but all will have the opportunity to respond to the question. To maximize our forum time and present the speakers with questions, we are limiting the review of our forum rules, although we do have copies available for the audience present with us this evening. This forum is intended to provide voters with information so they can make an educated choice on the ballot. The views expressed in this forum are those from the speakers. Our timekeepers for this evening are Mary Borgen and Wendy Draves. The audience is expected to be courteous to the speakers and good listeners. This is a live cable TV broadcast. The audience is asked to not express support or concern during the forum and to hold your applause until the end of the forum. We'd also like to remind everyone to please turn off your cell phones and pagers. And during the forum, we ask the audience present as well as our TV listeners to submit their questions. Our live audience can submit them in writing. Our TV listeners can call them in at 507-450-3859. The League of Women Voters and co-sponsors will sort the questions for the moderator. The moderator will ask the questions. The League will determine the questions to be asked, and attempts in good faith will be made to cover all areas of interest expressed by the audience. The speakers do not know the questions in advance. Questions that are hostile, partisan, embarrassing, inappropriate, or of a personal nature will not be asked. Questions on similar topics may be grouped, consolidated, and/or rewritten at the discretion of the question facilitators and moderator. All questions do become property of the League of Women Voters. Our speakers are going to strictly observe the time limits on their responses. The timekeeper will be holding up cards to indicate that time is about to expire, and once the stop card is displayed, the speaker will stop at the end of their current sentence. I will now read the Winona Area Public Schools referendum question as printed on the ballot. School District Question 1, approval of school district bond issue. Yes, no. Shall the School Board of Independent School District number 861, Winona Area Public Schools, be authorized to issue its general obligation school building bonds in an amount not to exceed $9,420,000 to provide funds for the acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities, including the construction, remodeling, upgrading, and equipping of life safety improvements and fire alarm and smoke detector systems at various school sites and facilities, the construction, installation, replacement, and remodeling of ADA accessibility improvements at various school sites and facilities, the construction of new entrances, vestibules, and secure entries, and the installation of new exterior doors at various school sites and facilities, the removal of asbestos from various school sites and facilities, the construction and equipping of electrical and mechanical system upgrades at various school sites and facilities, the construction of improvements to concrete walkways, curbs, parking surfaces, and hard play surfaces at various existing sites and facilities, the construction of a new roof to Goodview Elementary School, the equipping and installation of a new pool ventilation unit and the removal and replacement of flooring at Winona Middle School, and the removal and replacement of athletic lockers in the girls' and boys' locker rooms at Winona High School. By voting yes on this ballot question, you are voting for a property tax increase. At this time, we'll proceed with the 15-minute formal presentation presented by Sarah Slavey, Director of Fiscal Affairs, and Sarah Knudsen, Director of Special Education.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Slavey. I'm the Director of Fiscal Affairs. And as was stated, this is Sarah Knudsen, our Special Education Director. Thank you for the League of Women Voters for organizing this forum and allowing us to come and present information on the referendum. Our role tonight, as was stated, is simply to give information and to answer questions. We cannot and will not urge anyone to vote one way or the other.
Okay, so the process we'll use tonight in this is to do an overview, summarizing the process of the referendum. We will review the referendum scope, the estimated tax impact, and we'll give you voting information and give you information as to how you can learn more about the referendum.
Winona Area Public Schools has a long history of talking about its facilities. I've been in the district for 17 years, and I don't remember a time when it wasn't part of the landscape of our district and talking about it. This slide gives a bit of a recent narrative of what that conversation has been about. What I take from this is that there has been a ton of opportunities for public involvement. We've had public listening sessions, public information sessions. The task force had community members on it. There's been a ton of information that was made available on the website for people to take in. And there's also been 2 surveys that have been conducted, the most recent of which was just this last a year ago fall, and had almost 2,300 respondents, which was wonderful because then we get real good data to rely on.
So Sarah just referred to this community survey, and we thought it was important to share these results. You can see from the slide that the response to the survey was very favorable in asking us to collaborate with the community to develop a plan and ask for voter support through a bond referendum. So you can see the results there. And this was all residents, staff.
This was different groups. This particular slide is residents only, and the reason for that is we have some staff members who are not residents, who live outside of the district, and so for purposes of this slide, we wanted to make sure that that is representing residents of the district only.
So then staff, parents, and non-parents.
Excuse
sorry.
me?
Yeah, sorry. So staff, parents, and non-parents. So you can see the results of the slides indicate that it was very favorable for us to go ahead and look for a way to plan with the community as we move ahead in addressing the issues. We had overwhelming consensus to move ahead. Did I miss a slide there? Sorry. And it also asked us to move ahead very quickly. So this survey done a year ago prompted the conversation that we've had in the last year and brought us to this point where we're putting forth this referendum.
All right, so based on the input that we received from the community, to collaborate with the community, come back with another bond referendum question, and to do it quickly, the district reacted by convening the facility task force again. That group then took the complete list of projects that we've been talking about now for quite some time and categorized them into different areas. The categorization that they came up with is on the screen now. Of those categories then, they took it upon themselves to prioritize them and figure out what they as a group determined by consensus were the most high priority and most urgent needs in the district. And those areas that rose to the top were safety and security, accessibility, and building maintenance and repair, which we also refer to as critical asset preservation. Another area that the facility task force talked about was how to go about funding these types of projects. And so some of the things that they talked about were the fact that we have expiring debt on the middle school and needing to address these urgent needs now, but with the relatively low tax impact. And so that being said, the discussion was to attack this in phases. Rather than trying to do some large set of projects now, to phase it back and do something that was maybe a little easier to swallow. This allows for some additional time after this bond is paid off in 4 years, potentially. It allows 4 more years to continue the conversation about what the community wants in its buildings. So that being said, after a lot of time and discussion, the facility task force came forward with a phase 1 recommendation. That recommendation calls for secure vestibules in buildings, building accessibility needs, so the actual entering and exiting of our school buildings, managing the accessibility needs on our playgrounds, replacing a roof on Goodview Elementary, dealing with exterior building leaks that need to be dealt with, and fire alarms. We'll go into a little bit more detail by building as far as which buildings would be slated to get which projects, but it will be fairly general terms. If you want to see specific details on what all those different projects are, it's available on the website, and I believe there's a handout that was available tonight so that you can see what those are.
Okay, so for Goodview Elementary, really many of the needs are similar across the buildings, but for Goodview specifically, the roof replacement is critical at this point. So you can see the roof replacement, and then as you'll see as we go through the other slides, fire alarms and secure vestibules and all that are included. At Jefferson Elementary, we definitely want all students, staff, and visitors to feel safe in our school, and we also want them to have an accessible entrance. You'll notice from the photo here that the handicap accessibility at Jefferson Elementary is currently asking for persons with disabilities to enter the building in the rear, which is concerning to us. We want a welcoming and inviting, accessible entry. So one of the targets there specific to Jefferson Elementary is getting a handicap accessibility entrance.
Washington-Kosciuszko has much of the same types of needs. Again, we're dealing with 1930s original plumbing and electrical in these older buildings that need to be replaced and updated. The happy note with regards to Washington-Kosciuszko is we were lucky enough to have received a safety grant from the Department of Education just recently. So we've secured a $316,000 of other revenue to be able to help pay for some of these projects. The hiccup there is that it's too late in the election cycle to change the ballot language. That's just the way the grant cycle and the election cycle didn't line up for us. So we want to make sure that people understand that they will still see that bonding up to $9.42 million figure when they go into the voting booth on November 6th. But the district does not necessarily intend to bond for that full amount. We would bond for the difference between the 9.42 and the $316,000 that we received in funding from the safety grants. I believe that is on the docket for the board to take formal action on to make that an official intent so that the taxpayers have that reassurance prior to going into the voting booth. At Winona Middle School, the new Winona Middle School, as many people call it, the middle school is now 20 years old, hard to believe. So there are some things at the middle school that need to be updated and fixed. Security cameras need to be updated. Our fire alarm systems are 20 years old and need to be updated or replaced, if the case may be. The blacktop needs to be resealed, and there is a ventilation unit near the pool that needs to be replaced.
And at Winona Senior High School, the similar issues as far as security and cameras and fire alarm systems, but specifically to that building would be the blacktop reconstruction as opposed to just resurfacing in some of the other buildings. There's a need for the athletic lockers to be upgraded, and here again, just general accessibility needs that need to be addressed at the Winona High School. Winona High School is actually 50 years old at this point, so again, just that general maintenance and upkeep is necessary. And then at the Winona Area Learning Center, although this is a relatively new building, the security systems definitely here need some upgrades as well, also improvement in cameras, door control, and just those lockdown buttons and strobes.
So the question is, why a bond referendum now? And the first answer I would give to that is that our community told us to. In our survey last fall, the community said to collaborate with the community, come back with a bond referendum, and to do it soon. And so that's what we're doing here. With the expiring debt on the middle school, replacing that with a new bond will avoid a roller coaster in funding, which is something that school districts often do to try to keep that levy amount even. Bonding provides the funds needed to address the most urgent needs now. So it gives us that lump sum of dollars that are needed to do this list of projects. Also, because this is a short-term bond, it allows time for more discussion with the community on just what the community wants, what the community will support, and what the community wants their buildings to look like for the next 20, 30, 50 years. The other thing at play is that currently there is a 40% ag to school tax credit. It's on the books right now, but we don't know for sure what the legislature will do with that in the future. And so it would be great to be able to take advantage of that for our agricultural property owners in the district.
As well as benefit to the community, this bond referendum would have some potential benefit to the community as well. The community will benefit in ways that really could bring business and new families to the community. Our employers benefit from a well-prepared and educated workforce. As businesses are looking to come into our community, certainly updated and secure school buildings attract business, and families really consider these things as they look to relocate into our district. In addition to the community efforts, it's also important to recognize that in addition to just school activities, we also have 49 community groups that use the facilities for a total of 9,199 hours, and we have internal groups that use these facilities as well.
So this slide gives a summary of the costs associated with this bond referendum. You can see here that there's about $1.46 million in safety and security, another $1.44 million in accessibility, $6.38 million in critical asset preservation projects, another $127,000 in bond issuance costs, and the total of that comes to the $9.42 million. Now, some of you may say, whoa, just hold on a minute. You just said that you had $316,000 of new revenue. Why does this say $9.42 million here? The reason is, as I said earlier, we can't change the ballot at this point in the game. The ballot says that we will bond up to, or would be authorized to bond up to $9.42 million. the intention of the district would be to bond for the net of that 9.42 and the 316,000 that we've received in grant. However, we want to make sure that when people are going to the polls and they see that 9.42 million number on the ballot, that they're not confused. The next slide gives estimated tax impact. You can see that on residential home valued at $100,000, the monthly tax increase is estimated at $1.66 or $20 per month. This slide is based on the $9.42 million. When we factor in the $316,000 reduction, that comes down to about $19 per month on a $100,000 home. So it's not a huge per year. Yes, $19 per year. It's not a huge decrease, but it is a decrease nonetheless. Also, these are all residential examples. We recognize that there are commercial and agricultural properties in the district, and so those folks who have those types of properties, anyone really, should go to the tax impact calculator, which will let you put in information about your particular property and give you information on what your estimated tax impact would be. You've got 1 minute.
Okay. So frequently asked questions, the when, the how long, and the plan after phase one are really important. We really would look at doing these projects when they have least disruption to kids in school. We'd look at summer, the 2019 and 2020. The repayment of the referendum would be 4 years. And after the plan, we really would look back to the community in collaboration as we look forward as what our urgent needs would be next, and then over the next 50 years. If the referendum does not pass, we need to realize that these issues don't go away. Our buildings continue to age, and construction and inflation costs we know will continue to rise.
Election day is November 6th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you're unsure of where your polling place is, you can find out by going to the Secretary of State website, by entering your physical address. That will tell you where you should show up to vote on Election Day. Absentee voting is also open right now. Now through November 2nd, hours are 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. November 3rd, the Saturday before Election Day, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And on November 5th, the day before election, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Winona County will take care of the absentee voting.
Next, we have statements from each of our organizations that are present. They will have 2 minutes per organization to provide the opening. And Julie will provide the opening statement for Vote Yes.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us to be here tonight. On November 6th, the Winona community will have the chance to support a critical referendum that addresses some of the school district's most urgent building needs. The Vote Yes Committee is urging residents to support this bond. The projects in this bond need to be addressed as soon as possible for several reasons. First is building security, which is an issue that is on the minds of most parents and community members. We do not want to fail to protect our youngest students and then regret it later. Many school districts, even smaller than Winona, have already taken this step. We can't afford to delay it any longer. Second, our children with mobility limitations need to be able to access their school environment alongside their peers with as few barriers as possible. An accessible main entrance of their school respects their dignity and removes logistical and safety challenges. This referendum allows us to better meet the needs of all of our students. Third, several maintenance projects across the districts are at a critical level. For example, by addressing systems such as plumbing in Jefferson and WK, we can prevent an emergency plumbing failure that would result in damage to school property and cause significant disruptions to learning. All these issues would come at a direct cost to students' education. This referendum will move the Winona Area Public Schools in a positive direction, protecting our students and teachers and ensuring that their learning environment allows them to thrive. The children and teachers of the district need us to unite on this issue. It shows that we as a community are willing to invest in future generations. A yes vote says, yes, we want to protect our children, yes, we want to protect our school buildings from disaster and decay, and yes, we want all people with mobility limitations to have the same access as their peers. The entire community thrives when its public schools succeed and its youngest members are valued. As Winona continues to experience growth and development, we need to remember that our schools are an integral part of the city's success. The schools need strong community support, but the community also needs strong schools in order to flourish. By voting yes, you are helping to move Winona forward.
Alan Hillary will provide the opening statement for Save Our Schools.
So we want to let people vote with the way they're after they're fully informed. So we're going to try to clear up a few things that we found misleading, and I think the key question we should be asking ourselves is what's the best use of taxpayers' money at this time? So we're raising $10 million. The tax impact was just presented. Just to clarify that, the arrow on the left here, the red arrow, that's what they represent, the tax change from the previous year to next year. Now, just to be clear, so you don't get surprised in the future, the actual amount you're paying is represented by the blue bars there, and it's about 3 times what that number is represented, and that's due to the dropping off of existing debt. Along with the money that we're borrowing, we also need to borrow money for that. It's adding about 8.2% to all the costs. All the projects have been estimated by Wold for how much they cost, and they mark it up 20 to 30%. We have a couple examples that have come through well below their projected costs, demonstrating that they were marked up. Those are things that we did ahead of schedule for less than half the amount or a small amount. Each of the projects has that markup. We don't have any information about how much the project management by Wold or others is going to cost, but there's likely to be some funds left over. We do not know exactly how the funds will be used. For one thing, they cannot be used for teachers. They cannot be used for unreserved fund balance replenishment. Interesting enough, it could be used for acquisitions of sites, as noted in the ballot. Overall, we have to look at what's the most critical use of taxes over the next 4 years. And I'd say 2 of the most critical uses are the 2 that we can't use it for teaching, for preserving teachers, and preventing ourselves from going bankrupt.
Thank you, panel members, for your statements. We're now ready for our first audience question. All panel members will have the opportunity to respond, and each speaker will have 1 minute. First question is, where did the estimates for the costs of the roof replacement come from, and were there estimates from local contractors? Given the nature of this, I think probably safest to start with the school district. Anyone want to tackle
Sure.
that one?
The estimated costs for the projects included in the bond referendum were developed through Wold Architects. And there is, whenever you're doing projects like this, a certain amount of contingency fund built into it, and I believe that percentage is about 25%. You're never going to guess them exactly right on, no matter what kind of construction you're doing. With $9.42 million worth of construction, you're going to be over on some items and you're going to be under on some. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you've bonded enough to be able to pay for everything that is on the projects list. Otherwise, you just simply cannot do the projects, or if you're going to do the projects, you have to pull that money out of the classroom and out of the operating fund.
Anything to add, Ms. Booth? How about from Save Our Schools?
So yes, Wold has a database, they put it in there. They told me that they add 20 to 30%, and if it's done in a year later, they add another 5%. They also said that they're doing it to guarantee that it'll get done at that cost. I think for a lot of this maintenance, that's a guaranteed way to overpay if we don't get the extra money, and if we do have extra money, I don't know how it's going to be used. No local people were asked. I think they have a database that they get it from to answer the question specifically, from my understanding of how Wold comes up with this.
Yes, thank you. If you look at the details of the funding, there is no allotment to pay Wold, this fund from the Twin Cities. So one is left wondering where they would be compensated for the time they put into it. I'd be much more comfortable in their practices if they were upfront about their fees. Understandably, there would be fundings for contingency, but it'd be good if their fees were explained, because those will show up later.
Vote yes.
So most of us, when we go to complete a project in our home, we wouldn't estimate the lowest possible thing and assume that we could complete it. We'd want to make sure that it would happen before we start it. And so that's part of what these estimates include. As a member of the facilities task force, we talked about how opportunity of collecting this money from this bond is not just an opportunity to fix our schools, but for the school board to follow through on projects that we've asked them to do. And so we've tried to make it very clear that we are hopeful that instead of using this for other projects after it's done, that they will return the money to the taxpayer, and that has been discussions that we've heard from school district representatives and school board representatives thus far.
And just for clarification, I believe we're talking about the roof at Jefferson here, which is actually not part of this referendum, so this is a separate issue that is not part of this particular project and referendum.
All right, moving on to our next question. This proposed bond is for 4 years. What happens after that? And I think for this question, we will start with Save Our Schools.
They said they're going to do phase 2. I don't have any additional information about that. I could speculate something, but I don't feel that's pertinent.
No, I don't know anything about this rumored phase 2.
Vote yes.
Again, as a member of the facilities task force, the first and second time, part of our discussion was how phase 2 needed to be a low tax impact, and it needed to be our most needful projects, so that we could begin to make progress, but it would be rushing things to assume that we already know what our district needs 4 years from now when we are just experiencing our new configuration. So our task force recommended that we do these projects now and wait for phase 2 to figure out other things. And even the task force would have been divided about what exactly that should look like, and they wanted more information from the community as well. And so this was our chance to send it back one step at a time so we can get the things done that need to be done and still have a dialogue as a community about what we want going forward.
Anything to add, Ms. Harris?
Yes. To do a long-term study of what our district's needs are going to be for the next 40 to 50 years, to do that well takes time, and the task force, the reconvene, felt that some of these projects we cannot afford the time that would take because of potential problems that could arise by delaying any further. And also by taking a short-term, low-tax impact bond over 4 years, we're not tying our hands financially for the next 10 to 20 years by paying off something large that would direct our course for that amount of time. So these projects will be completed in 2 years, paid for in 4, and are just a modest increase in property taxes, and allows us to study the long-range plan without committing us to one certain direction.
And from the school district?
Phase 1 is really about these immediate needs, these real urgent needs. And so at the end of this 4 years, when this bond would be repaid, you'd have to evaluate where we are with collaboration with the community. I would expect that there would be collaboration all through those 4 years and continue after those 4 years if needed. It really comes down to what the community wants and what the community supports. There are no plans for phase 2. There are no solid plans in the works. That all has to come from the community between now and then if it happens.
Ms. Knudsen, anything?
Nothing to add.
Our next question. What impact, if any, will the lawsuit Save Our Schools has against the district have on the referendum? I think yes. Vote yes. We'll start with you if you have any response.
I'm not familiar with the terms of the lawsuit directly, but I know that part of it is the petition to reopen schools. And to reopen schools would not cancel out the projects that are needed in this bond. So these projects would still exist regardless of what else happened with the district. They're just not going to disappear because our focus is elsewhere. And the longer we wait, the more they will cost, because construction's costs rise every year. The greater risk there is of emergency failure that would disrupt student learning. So these projects need to occur no matter what is going on. And Vote Yes believes that we need to support it.
Ms. Heinrichs, anything to add? How about from the school district?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What impact, if any, will the lawsuit Save Our Schools has against the district have on the referendum?
As far as the projects themselves, I would say no impact. That has to happen, as you said, no matter what. As far as, you know, if that will sway people in the voting booth, only the voters know. That's a very individual choice that people need to make, and so we'll find out.
I will just reiterate that the needs in the current buildings don't go away regardless of what happens outside of that.
And from Save Our Schools.
I think one piece that if there's any redeeming, there are redeeming elements in this, proposed referendum. In fact, there are a number of pieces in here that are important, and one of them is that the school district would be investing in its elementary school buildings, and it's good to see that kind of investment in the buildings that we do have and continue to operate. Beyond that, it's I think not incredibly pertinent to the referendum. Maybe it is incredibly pertinent to the referendum. I think it'd be good if the school district listens to the voters. A couple of times what we've heard is that they listened, that there was a survey. The survey was very manipulative. I was on the Long Task Force in 2016, which didn't have room for voices that didn't align with exactly what WOLD was aiming to persuade the task force to do that would finance WOLD projects. So I hope that listening to the community, Sarah Slaby mentions that, I hope that the school district would indeed continue to listen to the community.
Anything to add, Mr. Hillary?
No.
Okay, on to question number 4. What are the handicapped issues at WK Elementary, given that ramps and sidewalks were previously installed there? And for that, we'll start with the school district.
So the ramps and entries are handicap accessible. They're not readily handicap accessible, so anytime a student, a community member, a parent would go to enter with a disability, a physical disability, they would have to go to the rear of the building to enter, which is not really acceptable. We want all of our students and families and community members to be able to enter the buildings in the equivalent fashion of everyone else.
Anything to add, Ms. Libby?
Okay.
And how about from vote yes?
This was specific to WK?
The question was specific to WK.
Okay. So the district, because they haven't invested large amounts of money into the elementary schools, has not been required to keep up with as many ADA requirements as there are. So currently, they come short of ADA true accessibility requirements, including things like hand railings and signage for where to find accessible restrooms or accessible entrances. They have done as many workarounds as they can to make it accessible for the students that we have, but it's still insufficient for what we would like it to be. So those are things that need to be improved at WK. And it's true, accessible restrooms at elementary schools across the district. Kids have to travel across the whole building to get to them, and it's lost educational time for them.
Anything from Ms. Hyman?
Mostly what she said, but just adding that accessibility issues don't just refer to the entrance and the ramps, but also to fixtures within the building as well. Doorways that are wide enough to accommodate equipment, bathrooms that are big enough to accommodate a caregiver and a child with equipment. So those are upgrades that also happen throughout the district, all the district's buildings with this referendum, but at WK as well.
And from Save Our Schools?
Could you repeat the question?
What are the handicapped issues at WK Elementary, given that ramps and sidewalks were previously installed there?
So I think they might be referring to, there's already a ramp leading up to a door at WK and the front of the building. Unfortunately, that appeared to be incompatible with their security model, so they wanted to make a ramp to the other door where they wanted to put the security vestibule in. I think might be what the question is asking about.
Anything to add, Ms. Nicholas?
Can I get a clarification? Is this the way that referendum money would be used, or is this about ways that the grant that was just received would be used?
The question does not specify.
I would be curious to see how the grant applied to that, and I have been disappointed that the school district for the past several years has not been applying for grants for ADA accessibility issues. I think ADA accessibility is incredibly important, and that our community has not been providing these services. There are grants available, there's long-term facilities maintenance revenue that I hope to see us using more wisely in the future to install, to implement, to make as accessible as possible and up to code in all ways possible for the students, the staff, community members, parents who need ADA accessibility. I think that's incredibly important.
All right. Question number 5. How will passing or not passing the, excuse me, the referendum affect enrollment? Will it result in loss of students that decide to go elsewhere? And for that question, we will start with Save Our Schools.
I don't know how it will affect enrollment. We did find out how much closing the other schools affected enrollment. We have more than 130 students that didn't show up. That's going to cause a lot of financial issues. I have no insight on how this particular referendum would change it. I think we should immediately turn around and have a better referendum if this one doesn't pass, one that doesn't do borrowing, that targets what it's doing for the lowest cost to be efficient, and put some money in a fund that can be used to replenish our health and safety money that got pulled out of the our reserve fund. And we should replace that. The taxpayers, we're going to pay for it. I think they should be asked to put money into it through a bond that can put money into that.
Ms. Micklich, anything to add?
I think that this bond, this referendum doesn't solve the problems that our district, the most pressing, many of the most pressing needs that our district has following the closure of schools and the loss of students since last spring. We do need to fund operating costs. The loss of 130 students following the closure of those schools has led to financial hardships for the district. And what we need is an operating budget, an operating referendum, possibly also a capital referendum. We do have long-term facilities maintenance revenue that has changed that structure, so that's now available from the state. And I hope that our district uses its funds wisely to care for the buildings that it has in order to provide the best education we can for all of the students in our district.
And how about from the school district?
I would not expect that the success or failure of this bond referendum would have an impact on student enrollment at all. As we said before, life goes on and the needs will remain if the referendum doesn't pass. And on the other side of things, if it does pass, we would be taking care of these projects when school is not in session as to not disturb student learning. But I really would not expect it to impact our enrollment in the immediate term anyway.
Ms. Newton, anything to add?
Yes, I would agree that there's probably potentially not a large impact on student enrollment. However, when families are interested in relocating to a community and they have a student with a disability, these accessibility issues extremely impact their decision-making in the community or the school district in which they will enroll. It's very critical to continue to ensure that we meet the needs of all of our students, and that then attracts new families to our community and our school district.
And from vote yes?
Nobody knows how it would affect enrollment. I mean, we can't peer into the future. I would argue that passage would have a potential positive effect. Increasing security is a big thing for parents right now, and that's really attractive for people who are looking at school choices for their kids. How safe are they going to be at their entrances? How are we controlling access into the buildings? That's a big one. Another thing is when people are looking to relocate to Winona for jobs or anything else, they look at how the community supports its schools. And any discerning parent who is making a choice is going to see, how does this community respond to the needs of the school district? Do they support them or do they not? And that's a really big issue when looking at a school district and a community to live in.
So what we've heard from some people is that it's a bit of a drawback that a lot of these projects are rather invisible to visitors. If they're completed, it will be hard to know that there's no longer asbestos in the walls, and that the plumbing has been repaired, and that the electrical systems are updated, and that the roof is new. There's very little that we'll be able to point to for our asset preservation to say, look, we're in better shape than we were before. But because it's crucial for students to have a safe environment which is free of distractions for learning, and because that some of these projects are only invisible to us that don't need them. So a lot of students don't recognize that there's no accessible entrance to the front of Jefferson. Even student teachers don't notice it until their professors point it out as they're going in. So because we aren't using those things, we might not be aware of it, but the families who do need them will see how we are approaching their needs and in our community.
Our next question. Will the planned upgrades and improvements bring our facilities up to date, or does more work need to be done, and if so, what? For that question, we will start with vote yes.
This referendum there is a long list of things that need to be done in the schools, and I don't have the entire complete list in my head. Some are broken up into short-term immediate needs. That's what this referendum attempts to address, is the short-term, very critical, need to do right now needs. Then there's some that need to be done in 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10, I can't remember the breakdown. There are bigger things that we decide not to tackle right now because they would be bigger ticket items. And we wanted to try to go for in the task force, a lower tax impact over a shorter amount of time.
Ms. O'Shea, anything to add?
There are a couple different definitions of up to date. So when we're talking about structurally up to date, is the plumbing up to date? 1930s plumbing, probably not up to date. But when we're talking about the layout of classrooms, it's still very much designed to be desks and rows facing a blackboard. And classroom instruction from a lot of the teachers in our district doesn't look like that. It looks interactive, it looks small groups, it looks interacting with a smart board, it looks sitting in different types of seats, and it requires a different layout of the classroom. So this would not update our facilities and bring them up to date for educational styles right now, which is what one of those things that's to be considered in phase 2. So it would bring a lot of projects up to date. Like Mrs. Heinrich said, probably not all of them because there was a long list and we opted for the ones that seemed most in danger of failing us soon.
And how about from Save Our Schools?
No is probably a pretty safe answer. Facilities will always need to be cared for. There will always be additional projects. We do need to find appropriate ways to invest in our school buildings and ways to use our long-term facilities maintenance revenue appropriately for safety, security, and accessibility. That is funding that is not from this grant, from this referendum, so that's additional separate funding that's available. I also, to the extent that voters would be approving the district acquiring property, that one of the first things on this referendum is acquiring property, and I don't know how many of you knew that that was there before you came today, that we would be approving the acquiring of property. I don't think that that would contribute to improving the up-to-dateness, as it were, of our school buildings. I hope that we continue to look for grants and using the funding that we do have available from the state through appropriations wisely as we move forward.
Anything to add, Mr. Hillary?
Yes, there's a very long list of things, and it's for all the schools. Like the high school still burns fuel oil, which is very expensive for heating. The middle school is coming up on a roof already, which is a very big roof, very expensive. There's a long, this isn't the end of the list.
From the school district?
This is not a fix-all bond referendum. This is something that would address a very specific list of what is considered to be urgent needs. As far as the acquiring property language that is in the ballot, That is legal jargon that we are required to have in the ballot. It does not refer to acquiring land. It refers to acquiring the supplies and materials that are required in order to complete these renovations and updates to our existing buildings. So there is no interest, there is no plan, nor do I think it's legal, to purchase land with the proceeds of the bond referendum funds.
I would add that the list is long of the things that we need to do to bring things into compliance. The rules are different with new construction versus currently existing facilities. And so I would agree that we are definitely addressing those things that are urgent and affect most people. We're always at risk for people with disabilities entering our schools and our communities and having issues arise around individual education plans that we have to address those specific issues. So that list will never end, really.
All right, we're on to our last question before we move to our closing statements. I think this is the big question in everybody's mind. What happens if the referendum does not pass? We will start with the school district.
If the referendum does not pass, none of these needs go away. They stay. And as our buildings age, there will be more needs that surface. And not only that, but if we're going to attack some of these projects in future years, there is, of course, always construction inflation that needs to be dealt with and kept in mind. I've heard that could be as high as 17% a year. It's up for deliberation as to what that percentage actually is. But the truth of the matter is the needs don't go away. We would need to continue to collaborate with the community and look for other ways or something else that the community would support to get our buildings into safe and secure form for our students and our staff.
Anything to add, Ms. Knudsen?
No, thanks.
How about from Save Our Schools?
I'd like to see the new board that's elected in November approach a number of these questions. I'd like to see a financially responsible board that can actually listen to the community, not just try to manipulate the community. I think that we have a lot of work to do, and as a strong supporter of public schools and a strong believer in public schools, I think that we have our work cut out for us. We've faced some neglect, we've faced some hastily pulled together referendums, just to put Band-Aids on things or try to get something out there. I'd like us to see us move with more financial responsibility. Just to respond to a previous point, maybe I don't know how to read, but this says to provide funds for the acquisition and betterment of school sites and facilities. So that would be the acquisition of school sites. It's in the referendum. That's what voters would be approving. It'd be pretty hard to say that they didn't approve that if it came up to it. So I'm not sure what the school district intends with that or where they are currently, but that is what voters would be approving.
Mr. Hillary, anything to add?
I already outlined some of the ideas that I thought we should be, when we turned around and did a different referendum that would avoid the borrowing costs, be more targeted, fund, or make sure we don't go bankrupt during the 4 years because of the 130 students that we're losing and what's going to add up to more than close to $1.2 million of revenue, the new teacher's contract, the new busing contract will have to be renewed, the busing company's losing money. All these things are going to add pressure to our budget, and we got to respond, hopefully with new approach.
Vote from vote yes.
If it doesn't pass, the district will obviously come back to us again and ask us to step forward and save our schools, our community, by doing something positive. It might not be the ideal of all of our dreams, but it's something to move us in the right direction. Construction costs go up on average at least 5% a year. Last year it was 17% due to tariffs and construction worker shortages. So if we waited a year and did this as an operating or a bond a construction levy and paid for it as we went. By the time we finished 4 years of pay-as-you-go and finished that 4th year of projects, 5 years from now, we would end up paying more at a 5% increase than we will paying the interest on this bond in finishing the projects in 2 years and the bond paid off in 4. So it is important to move forward now instead of later, because otherwise we're going to keep spinning our wheels and coming back to how we solve this.
Anything to add, Ms. Heinrichs?
I would just say, if this doesn't pass, our students wait again and again and again. We've waited a long time to do some of these repairs, and we just can't afford the time to continue to wait. I would say the district is trying to move us in a positive direction by investing in maintaining and upgrading and fixing some of these things that need to be done, and seeking outside grants by looking at the safety and security grant that was awarded to WK in order to be fiscally responsible for the taxpayers as well. But it's time that we need to move forward with this.
We're now nearing the end of our forum, and each speaker will have the opportunity to present a 1-minute closing argument or remark. I'm going to give each organization the opportunity to decide who goes first for your group. So let's start with Save Our Schools.
So I think the district's got a lot of issues going on. I think the most interesting part of this talk will be the next one, when the new candidates are here to find out where they stand, because we got a lot of problems. We got serious fiscal problems headed our way. We tried to save money by closing the schools. It's supposed to save $700,000, and we ended up heading in the wrong direction. That was the only thing they wanted to consider for budget cuts. We have to figure out what they're going to cut next. And I'm worried that we'll be tapped out from tax dollars if we have already committed to this bond referendum, because we'll have to ask for more money to make our operating budget not go negative.
Anything to add?
Our school district has real needs. However, if our school district wants to acquire property, it needs to be upfront with the voters, not just hide it in a really, really, really long referendum. And not put it in their marketing material. In November, the voters will elect a new school board. I hope that that new board will actually listen to the community, not just go through the motions of listening to the community via Wold, the architect company, or something like that, or a survey that is incredibly manipulative. I believe in strong public schools. I would like to see a school board that can work with the community, and work with financial responsibility to move our district forward, not to say we don't know what effect it will have on enrollment, as they said with the school closings last spring tragically, and now we've lost 130 students. If this referendum This referendum doesn't reflect the actual needs of our district, its teachers and our students, and we need to move in that direction.
And for vote yes.
There is no acquisition of property in this referendum. Students suffer when rumors are perpetuated. I truly believe that this is an opportunity for us to come together to make some positive steps for our students and our schools.
Ms. O'Shea?
With this bond, we have the real chance to affect the future of our district. The people who lived in our area in the 1930s and the 1960s and the 1990s took steps to provide for the future students of this district, and we are grateful to them. And now it is our turn to take up the torch. They paved the way for us, but we cannot coast on their contributions or wait for outside sources to save us. We must take the steps to ensure that our buildings are usable for the students of the future. We must make our schools safe, healthy, and accessible.
And from the school district?
Again, I will reiterate that there is no plan to purchase property. That's language that we actually tried to have removed from the ballot language, but that was against our legal advice, and so we had to leave it in there. Also, there's been a question raised as far as where the unused funds would go. If we bond for $9.1 million and we only use $9 million, where's that other $100,000 go? There's a couple of choices. Either the district could pay down on the debt, which would mean that would be less taxation of the the taxpayers. Or there could be other projects that are done that would be within the scope of the current ballot language. And really, we're unable to say what that would be right now because the answer to that is going to depend somewhat on how much there is. Paying down, let's say there's 25,000 left, paying down on the debt, for 25,000, that's not a huge dollar amount, but that may make a real impact at a school if we did some other project. So there's a couple of options there as far as what we can do with any unused funds, but we need to wait and see what that dollar amount would be to make a good decision.
Ms. Knudsen, anything to add?
As we work as a district to create a caring and inclusive environments for all of our students and community members as they access our buildings, it's extremely imperative that we take care of the infrastructure that leads to those accessibility issues for persons with disabilities. Students cannot benefit from curriculum and instruction if they don't have their physical needs met and they don't have the same opportunities as persons without disabilities as we enter our schools. So those needs are just critical for us to address right away, and those don't get better as we move along.
We're now at the end of the time for this forum. We want to thank all of our speakers for an informative event and remind the voters that this referendum question will be on the November 6th, 2018 general election ballot. This evening concludes the only League of Women Voters of Winona 2018 Voter Services Educational Forum. It will be posted on the League of Women Voters Winona Facebook page within a few days. If you need to register to vote or change your address, this should be done by Tuesday, October 16th, 2018. You can register online at the Minnesota Secretary of State's website, and you will need a Minnesota driver's license or valid state ID. If you need information on becoming a registered voter or your polling location, call the Winona County Auditor or the Winona City Clerk. Minnesota does have registration at the polls. Check the Minnesota Secretary of State's website on the process, as several items of identification must be provided on election day to election judges. MNLWV.org is a website you may also use for general voter service information. The polls will be open from 7 o'clock a.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. on November 6th, 2018. Please vote. Thank you and have a great evening.